November 5th, 2005, the tornado. Just talk to me, I guess, first of all, about how you how you guys heard about it.
So first of all, November, you can't really talk about November 6th without talking about November 5th, because November 5th of 2005 was just an unusual day. Very, very warm. In fact, I had relatives from out of town, and we went aboard the LST that evening, had dinner. It was just like a early summer or late spring day. Just fantastic. Storms happened, at 2 a.m. And I remember getting a call from another reporter who had been working late in the newsroom and had stayed up and said, there's been a tornado that's hit and they think there's been fatalities. So I immediately got out of bed, and at that point I was the metro editor at the Courier, and so began calling reporters to be able to rally them to meet at the newsroom. And in some cases I knew some had already gone to the hospital, so we sent some reporters to the hospital, and then meanwhile came in and started to try to coordinate coverage as to how we were going to tell this story. So, even at that time, the news went very quickly, not just nationally, but internationally, to know that there had been multiple victims that had been killed in a tornado that caused the most damage and the greatest loss of life at the mobile home park called Eastbrook. And so not only were we trying to coordinate coverage in the newsroom, but we were also getting calls that I was fielding and doing interviews with the BBC, with CNN, with NPR. I mean, you name the news organization, they were calling our newsroom to try to get information about what had occurred, and what we call death before dawn. I mean, the fact that this happened at 2 o'clock in the morning while people were asleep, and so many people went to sleep that night, just like I did, and it had a nice full day of, celebration and family and being outside on the weekend. The fact that that occurred when it did in the evening really did surprise a whole lot of people.
Including the weather people. I mean, you talked to the forecasters, and I've talked to Wayne and Jeff both, and they didn't see, there was nothing in the forecast that indicated this was coming. They just it caught everybody off guard. Can you talk about, I guess, the danger in that too? I mean, just how much it did catch people by surprise in the middle of the night, kind of a perfect storm for casualties.
Yeah, one of the things that we did that we were really proud of is that we wanted to make sure this story was more than just the fact that a tornado hit and there had been people that had died. There were folks who, homes were destroyed, in Newburgh. Folks were without power. I mean, there was widespread power outages for days. And it really helped us demonstrate the power of community that a newspaper has. The newspaper really was the source of information for people to find out what had happened. And most importantly, we really had a commitment to make sure people knew who these victims were. So there were multiple reporters who were assigned to try to tell the story of each one of those victims. And we had special coverage in the newspaper that made sure that the gravity of what had been lost when that tornado hit and killed folks in Dagonia Springs, as well as the Eastbrook Mobile Home Park, was really told in a very compelling fashion. It's probably one of the most, of my 16-year career at the Evansville Courier and Press, it was a time where I was most proud to be a journalist, and to be a journalist who was helping lead coverage of reporters who did a fantastic job over those several days of coverage. In fact, the UW Scripps Company did nominate the Courier for a Pulitzer. Just the fact that we were nominated for that coverage was a tremendous honor for the work that reporters did in trying to tell that a massive story of the loss of life. I didn't answer the question that you asked.
But that's okay. The question, again, that I asked being, again, it kind of was a little bit of a perfect storm there. You had mobile home park, 2 a.m, no warning, how much, can you say how much of it was kind of that perfect storm for disaster?
I tell you, I mean, the fact that it happened at 2 o'clock in the morning, and the fact that people were really caught unaware, the fact that they had just had what was just unheard of, unseasonably warm weather. I mean, no one really predicted it, and the fact that it happened at 2 o'clock in the morning really was just excused upon really the perfect storm.
Is there anything else you want to say about the tornado before I move on to blizzards and whatnot?
the Courier and Press. I mean, the publisher Jack Pate, who's still there that day. I remember meeting with him early in the morning, and he said, we're going to do a special edition. We're going to dedicate extra newsprint. And at the end of the day, a newspaper is still a business, but to have that commitment to be able to do multiple pages of full coverage, for the tornado without concern about advertising or revenue. I mean, it showed a lot of leadership for the Courier at that time to be able to step out and to make sure we had adequate space and resources to tell the story, which was, one of the largest, most significant natural disasters that Evansville has seen in many, many years.
One of the things that former Mayor Weinzappel said to me when we talked about this was that what he was proudest of in this entire thing was that FEMA, as they were leaving, basically said the way that the Evansville community rallied around this and rallied around the victims should be essentially the template for every other community that faces disaster. Did you see that too?
Absolutely. I mean, people gave a lot of outpouring of support to the people in the Eastbrook Mobile Home Park. The American Red Cross, did a first-rate job. I mean, you always think about where's the worst place that a tornado can hit, and it's a mobile home park, and that's exactly what happened in this case. I think the one thing that's really good that's happened out of this is that, there has been a lot of focus on disaster preparedness, and I think the local weather forecasters, Wayne Hart, is certainly one of them that really promoted trying to have the weather alert radios in your home, as well as legislation that was advanced to try to make sure mobile homes had tie-down straps on them as well. So there was things that happened, out of the storm that have been beneficial to raise the awareness to make sure that we're not caught unaware again at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Jumping to another story, you were 10, 11 years old in 1978 when there was a huge blizzard.
Oh my gosh. We're jumping like, wow. Yeah.
Big segment.
Oh gosh, I didn't know I was going to get all this. Gosh, it's going to be the Jim Beck show. Okay.
I like
so,
that stuff to edit,
yeah. So,
78.
So 1978, I would have been in Evansville. I grew up in Evansville most of my life on the west side of town. Was 10 years old, and I don't think I went to school that winter for I don't know how many weeks. It felt like it was months that we were out of school. And being a 10-year-old boy, it wasn't just the amount of snow that you got. Like one day you'd get 16 inches, another day you'd get multiple inches. But it was the fact that blizzard of 78, the wind was so strong that the snow that we got also drifted and created significant snow drifts. So I remember, being a kid and going outside, and you would walk on snow drifts that later had kind of iced over, so you could walk on them. But if they kind of fell under your weight, you would be buried in snow. I mean, you would have snow over your head, almost like an avalanche. So it was fantastic as a kid because you got to miss all this school, and you had snow that was so deep that it was just mind-boggling.
Have you seen anything like that since? I mean, both...
I'm a little taller now.
Both the storm itself, the difference between a traditional snowfall and a blizzard, the visibility, the winds, that sort of thing. Can you talk a little bit about the uniqueness of that?
No, in my lifetime, we've never had a snow that like we've had in 78, and I had the benefit, of working, in the Evansville Courier and Press for many years, and had the benefit of working with what you could call the old timers, folks who were in the newsroom in 1978 when they had to stay there, and sleep in the newsroom, and other snows that another generation of reporters thought that were just fantastic, still never compared to the stories that I heard, from the veterans of the newsroom who said, "You think this is snow? It's nothing compared to 1978.
What's nice is I can then clip straight from that into Rich Davis talking about sleeping in the newsroom. I have interviewed him about this. Okay. He and I have talked about this. That was nice. You didn't do that on purpose, but I liked it.
Okay.
Anything else you want to say about the blizzard? A couple years later, you had the June 8th windstorm in 82, something that weather people talk about as being another benchmark in Evansville. Can you talk about that at all? Do you remember that at all, the damages and all of that?
So it's kind of funny when people talk about the June 8th storm. A really good question to ask is which June 8th storm? Because there's been several June 8th storms in Evansville's history, which seems to be kind of a cruel irony that you have these multiple storms that hit very early in June. There was one that happened when I was a child. where they kept us after school. I was going to Cynthia Heights. Everybody was afraid. Your parents had to come pick you up. And I remember going back to my home that evening on the west side of Evansville, and my parents had a little over an acre of land, and almost every tree on their property was down. So you couldn't even see the grass for all the trees that had been toppled. Just an amazing amount of destruction. Thankfully, it hit a lot of trees as opposed to taking life, but significant damage that I still remember to this day.